I was saying about your reputation in boxing and what it really means. It means literally nothing, like you can be on top of the world, and then when you start aging and your skills start eroding, you become a punch bag, you become a laughing stock. When you're unable to live the same lifestyle because the finances ain't coming in like that no more, and you may not have invested your money as well as needed be, you're looked on as a laughing stock. There's too many fighters to name as examples, and I don't want to name them on this video in particular. The hot prospect takes that L, and from being the cool kid in the class, everybody's like, I told you so. Everybody's like, I told you so, from the people who said he was going to be the next world champion and the next big thing in boxing, to the people who always knew that when he came up against a test, that there's a good chance that he'd get exposed. You got your peers bigging you up, world champions. Tyson Fury said, I could say I sparred with a young king coming up. I thought he was fantastic. That was a tweet. The headline on TalkSport, Dan's the man. Tyson Fury has sparred with Daniel Dubois. Gypsy King says youngster is going to be world champion one day. It won't be long until Daniel Dubois has a world title belt around his waist. That's according to promotional stablemate Tyson Fury. In 13 professional fights, because this was last year, 2019, November, Dubois knocked out 12 of his opponents, including Tyson Fury's cousin, Nathan Gorman, at the O2 Arena in July for the British title. I've had the opportunity to spar with him and seen him in a few fights, and he is a big prospect, Fury told the Sports Breakfast Show in an exclusive chat. I think he's definitely a future world champion. He's a young lad in a man's body, and the most important thing is not to rush him. And I think promoter Frank Warren is a master at that and very clever at his job. Dubois, at this time they were trying to get in fights with Dave Allen and Derek Chisora. They were even talking about David Price. Well, they reckon that Derek Chisora or David Price didn't want it, but they're saying Dave Allen priced himself out. But 1 year on, the unheralded Joe Joyce, an underdog when he took Daniel Dubois on Saturday, is the man they're all talking about, getting all the plaudits. Dubois takes a knee and is unable to get back up. Joyce is one of the toughest men on this planet. What a win. This is from BT Sport. Well, I'm assuming like Frank Warren were hoping for a Dubois win. But more importantly is the jab that Tyson Fury took at Daniel Dubois. A far cry from the praise he was heaping on Daniel not so long ago. Boxing is a heart sport, is what Tyson Fury inscribed on an Instagram post bigging up Joe Joyce for his victory. Tyson called it a great boxing display and congratulated him and left the subliminal message here. Boxing is a heart sport, not a hard sport, a heart sport, which a lot of people are taking as a shot at Daniel Dubois, which I believe it is. Dillian Eubank Jr., Carl Frampton, Peter Fury, Spencer Fearon, and I could go on and on and on and on and on. Pundits, boxers, trainers, media are all accusing this kid of quitting. Where I really have sympathy for Daniel is the orbital bone injury, which at 23 is not the type of injury you need, man. The likes of Donaire and Kell Brook had achieved quite a lot by the time they got their injuries. Dubois hasn't even won a European title. And that loss, if he didn't have the orbital bone injury, but even with it, this should really be the greatest moment of his boxing career, losing that fight. Even though you can't see it, because this is where you know what's required and what you have to do. It's as clear as day. You can walk away now and no one can say anything because boxing's a tough game. You can walk away from it, or you can go back knowing what you have to do and how hard it's going to be. So when you do run into adversity, it shouldn't come as much as a shock because you know what that is now and you're ready to go. And I would imagine for a boxer who's fallen from grace in front of his peers and the media, that redemption must be sweet. Like when Duran was walking down Davy Moore in Madison Square Garden, and I still hear that horn. Packed crowd, MSG beat the crap out of undefeated Davy Moore from the Bronx, New York. I used to watch that tape repeatedly. They used to have this artist, he used to draw pictures in the audience, Leroy Neiman. Never forget them days, man. Never forget them days. You know, and Duran redeemed himself from the Nomads fight in that fight there. Carlos Ortiz, a lightweight champion from the 60s and a very, very good fighter. I believe he retired in 1970 and then he made a comeback, won a few fights, and he took on Ken Buchanan at the MSG, same place where I'm saying Duran redeemed himself against Davy Moore. And he quit. He retired at the end of the 6th. And he never fought again. He was Puerto Rican. And I remember reading that a lot of his countrymen never forgave him for quitting. And then, you know, you get over things after a time. They had to reclaim their son. And Puerto Ricans, they love the guy. And time heals. And he's one of Puerto Rican's greatest. You know, Vitali quit against Chris Bird. Shoulder injury. Sort of redeemed himself against Lennox. He didn't win the fight, but he put up a very spirited battle. And he did go on to become WBC champion and make numerous defenses. He redeemed himself. Anyway, you know, Frank has basically done a Don King, but a little more subtle, where he walked in with the winner and walked out with the winner. He just revealed that Joe Joyce signed an extension on his contract with Frank before the Dubois fight, and that they paid hundreds and thousands to get him out of his contract with Ringstar, which is Richard Schaefer's promotional outlet. I don't know who he's actually promoting with that promotional outlet right now. So Daniel's going to have to fight his way back into Frank's good books right now. Rebuilding job. Joe keeps talking about fighting Usyk. Why didn't he just go after Fury? Maybe he sees Usyk as an easier touch. If Tyson Fury's next fight is going to be in Britain, why not against Joe? Joe is the obvious guy right now. So everybody was trying to second guess Frank Warren's reaction to Joe Joyce's win against Daniel, thinking that he wasn't happy that Joyce won. But the more likely take on the situation is that he wasn't bothered because he was winning regardless. What's he going to get all excited for? Whoever won, Frank won. He's still got a rebuilding job to do with Daniel. So he probably didn't want to make it look like he's all on Joe's bandwagon and forgetting about Daniel. So he's probably a bit careful with his words and what he said and how he broke down the fight and Daniel's performance and Joe's. You have to remember, Frank is a 40-year-old veteran in his game. When do you see Frank displaying over-emotional displays of joy because his fighter won? You don't really see it. You don't really see it. Eddie Hearn now, you saw him run in the ring when Carl Froch knocked out Lucien Bute. And when Tony Bellew won the title and Eddie ran up to him and Tony blanked him, we've seen Eddie do that, but it's not Frank's thing. Frank's a bit more calculated than that. Doesn't give away his cards like that. Eddie likes talking. He likes the camera more than Frank. Frank is adjusting to social media. Eddie was kind of like a baby of social media. It was second nature to him. Frank's weighing it up and calculating it, mate. That's what he's doing. The pros, the cons. Don't be fooled. He's a promoter. If he had that much faith in Daniel, he wouldn't have had Joe signing contract extensions, would he? You know? He may have made Daniel feel like he's the A-side dude, and in many ways he was. But if he was really the A-side dude like that, there'd be a rematch clause. He didn't give Daniel no rematch clause. I'm not sure if Daniel really wants a rematch immediately anyway. But look, business is business. It is what it is. You know, don't listen to everything these promoters say when they say, oh, I'm really committed to this or I'm not committed to that. Read between the lines, man. My opinion, though, earlier this year when Dubois and Joyce were originally slated to face each other in the ring, I don't think Frank was too worried about having Joyce under some long contract. But since COVID started cancelling this, that, its cousin and its dad, and they had to keep pushing the fight back until eventually we got it in November, I think as the fight drew closer, then got cancelled, then drew closer, then got cancelled, then drew closer. Frank was listening to experts and people around him in his team saying, yo, Frank, this is a tough fight. I think that's when they probably made a more concerted effort to tie Joyce down to something longer. It's just business. It's never personal. Anyway, I've noticed a repeating trend where boxers who have either quit or allegedly quit or suffered eye injuries are very supportive of Daniel Dubois. O'Hara Davis, he quit against Josh Taylor, and he's not too pleased about people trolling Daniel Dubois, even though O'Hara admitted that he did quit against Josh Taylor. Then there's Frank Bruno, who, before he turned pro, was sent to Colombia to fix some eye issues, I believe the retina, before he turned pro. You know, Mickey Duff sent him to Colombia. And then after the first Tyson fight, he suffered retina damage and didn't fight for a little while. Got it sorted out, at least temporarily, then got back in the ring. And the last fight with Mike Tyson, Tyson busted the retinas again in '96, retiring Bruno for good. And he's very close buddies with Daniel. And he wasn't impressed by the trolling and criticism of Dubois at all. And then there's Anthony Ogogo, who was an Olympian alongside Anthony Joshua, Katie Taylor, Luke Campbell. And he retired very early into his pro career. He was signed with Golden Boy and Matchroom. And when he took on Craig Cunningham, the unfancied Craig Cunningham, he apparently brought a damaged eye into the ring, which the southpaw Cunningham exploited, exacerbated the injury, eventually stopped Anthony Ogogo and ended his career. Matthew Macklin was apparently questioning Ogogo's heart, and Matthew Macklin was critical on Daniel Dubois on how he responded to eye damage and going down from a jab and quitting, basically. And Anthony Ogogo done a video with Boxing Social voicing his disapproval of Macklin and other people who accuse boxers of being quitters when they don't know all the facts of what's happening. I wonder what Kell Brook's take on it is. Does he see Daniel Dubois as a quitter? A lot of people see Kell as a quitter. What can I tell people about the scorecards, who was up and who was dictating, who was controlling? Daniel is the more compact hooker. Joe was never going to get anywhere trading hooks with Daniel. His jab was the most effective weapon, and that's what he used. But Joe wasn't jabbing for a points decision. No, he was stepping in with his jab. He was using the jab while he was rolling away, moving, jab to the body. Joe fought like a man who knew this fight couldn't go the distance. This wasn't like Anthony Yarde, who was waiting for that pull counter all night. Like, that's a great strategy. We saw that Yarde looked way better against Kovalev when he had the high guard and was walking him down. He was more consistent. He looked like a more complete fighter when doing that. And it made sense. Kovalev had been stopped a couple of times. Rumors were spreading that he wasn't always living the life. He liked the Russian vodka, etc., etc. So yeah, put the pressure on him, take his legs away. But they didn't do that. They went in there trying to counterpunch in Russia. Joe Joyce didn't do that. Joe Joyce knew he couldn't trade hooks. He was going to keep throwing that jab until it marked up something, and he was going to try and exacerbate it, make it worse, and get Daniel out of there. And he did it. Now, Daniel assisted him with some of the worst head movement I've seen on a top heavyweight prospect in a while. Non-existent head movement, should I say. He set a target. He caught the eye, and he stayed with it. When he saw Dubois was basically racing against the clock to finish the fight and hopefully scrape a points decision, that's when he started stepping up from the 8th round onwards. Joe timed his fight to perfection. You know, let's not talk about Daniel had to survive 2 rounds. Like, 2 rounds is just like 2 minutes. No, 6 minutes is an eternity in a boxing ring. Joe did what he had to do, and he done it very well. Inside the limit, inside 10, like I said. He couldn't let this fight go the distance. He couldn't, because he wasn't going to get nothing on the scorecard, even though I had him way, way, way up. And a lot of other people did too. This was a professional job. There was no luck in it. There was no, oh, if Daniel had did. No. Joe did what he done to perfection. It's as simple as that. He knew he couldn't win on the scorecard, but he knew he couldn't just rush in there and just gamble early on, so he sickened Daniel with the jab. The jab can be a sickener of a punch. Ask pros and coaches. If you don't believe, if you think it's just the jab, ask the pros and coaches. The jab can be an absolute sickener of a punch. And he did it with 2 rounds remaining. You know, anyone talking about if Daniel could survive 2 more rounds, we'd be taking out a dead boxer today or a blind 23-year-old. Joe knew victory was in sight at the end of the 9th. Like I said, he done that Roberto Duran thing where he waved his hand at Dubois like, go back to your corner, boy. He knew the fight was won. Daniel had his moments, but he wasn't persistent and he wasn't consistent enough. Just like Wilder had his moments in the first fight with Tyson Fury. He had some big moments with the knockdowns, but he was outboxed for most of it. When you get to this level here, you can do the Ernie Shavers thing, the George Foreman thing, and blast people out. But there's going to be times where that don't work. And you're going to have to be able to land something consistently to win the fight. And that's real boxing right there. Joe, not the most elusive guy, but he knew enough to roll out of the full impact of Daniel's right hook. And Daniel, for whatever reason, didn't come back with the left hook. Joe diffused his offense, while Daniel couldn't diffuse Joe's jab. That's where the fight was won and lost. Bottom line, in a 12-rounder, championship rounds, Joe had his tactics right. Anyone making a case for anything for Daniel, when you eat so many jabs, you're not looking at this thing with an objective eye. You can't eat that many jabs and be successful in boxing. You can't. And if he eats, listen, he won't need to get hit with no power shots for the rest of his career. If he eats jabs like that, his career is over in 3 to 2 years. Over. Now, as much as I would like to give Joe all the credit for being a great technician, Joe had to rely on his chin as well. Joe had confidence in his chin. And I don't like fighters who rely on their chin to bring victory, because defense is better than getting hit at all times. But Joe did that and had confidence in his chin. So that enabled him to carry out his strategy because he had confidence in his chin. Joe went out there probably knowing that the scorecards were going to be there against him. But he didn't go out there throwing hands trying to get Daniel out there. But no, he carried out his strategy because he had confidence in his jab, in his chin, in his ability to impose his will on Daniel. Daniel didn't really hurt Joe. I'm not saying Joe didn't feel the power, but Daniel couldn't hurt Joe. And it wasn't like Joe was doing a kingpin, shelling up, blocking a lot of the shots. Daniel landed, but he couldn't do nothing with Joe. So as much as that orbital bone was hurting Daniel, he knew he couldn't hurt Joe as well. I was hurting. You can't hurt Joe. And you got to give Joe Joyce the credit for that. There's no one else you can give the credit for that. Joe did all of that. Joe put it on Daniel. Some people are saying that Daniel threw the fight away. I don't see it like that one bit. You know, people are asking if Daniel could have toughed it out for 2 more rounds. Even Frank Warren said the fight was going to have to be stopped anyway. Frank Warren said it. And trust me, the judges are lucky that fight didn't go to the limit and Daniel got the W on points. Because people would be screaming robbery. It would be the type of victory that Daniel wouldn't want. Trust me.